Hello, everyone. That Weems guy here for another episode. And we're actually starting this episode over again because as Mark joined in after we started, his cell phone number was on the screen. And rather than have it appear in every truck stop on the West Coast, we decided that we would reboot and get it removed from his device showing online. Uh, Last week's episode with Ernest Langdon and Carl Wren was entirely too reasonable. It was two people had a difference of opinion and reasonably discussed it, and that violated internet rules. And so I got two people together tonight, and Eric and Mark, to guarantee that we won't have a reasonable discussion. How about that? So joining us tonight, Mark. Say hello to everybody. Introduce yourself.
Okay, Mark Fricke, retired sergeant from the Prescott, Arizona Police Department. Did 20 years there, 8 prior years to that, 4 years in the Air Force, 4 years in Nebraska. Been a firearms instructor since 1980. Had my own business, American Firearms Training and Tactics, since 1992. I work for a national training organization as a trainer, teaching police officers how to be firearms instructors. Guns are my life, and I just work around guns. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Lee.
Sure. And folks, Mark is in a teardrop trailer somewhere in Utah on a cell phone. So that's going to explain that his audio is not going to be perfect and his video may freeze up. But hey, I'm in my kitchen, so what can we expect? Next, frequent guest Eric Gelhaus, and I will pause for a second for everyone to get their beverage so they can take a drink with Eric being mentioned. Eric,
Sorry, I had to drink since my name was mentioned. Thank you,
all right.
young David Gagel. Eric, so my company's Cougar Mountain Solutions. Started teaching gun sight back in 2000. Did the cop thing after the military thing, from both the Cold War into the early part of the global war on terror, and almost 3 decades on the West Coast. I worked a variety of assignments. Years ago, I met Lee, and somehow he still tolerates my presence.
All righty. Um, we are going to discuss a variety of topics tonight. One from choosing a pistol if you were suddenly in the need to replace one, and some different things like metrics and training. And these are all coming from questions that were posed to us by viewers/listeners, depending on which format they get the show. I have tried to avoid the Sig P320 thing on the show, other than messing with Hearn, who had to carry one as a condition of his employment. And it was just a vehicle to mess with Hearn, and I'll take any such vehicle I can get. Um, but I've tried to avoid it for one because there are no definitive answers. And for number two, I just did not want the headache that would go along with tackling that topic. But we are at a boiling point with that particular topic, so it's going to finally make its way into a show. But I'm going to set a stage for that first. This past week, there was a third jury verdict that ruled that it was a quote defective design unquote. Folks, we need to understand that that ruling or those rulings have nothing to do with the internal design of the gun. They are all based on the fact that there's no trigger safety on the pistol. The one this past week was that the agency chose to order the variant that did not have an external safety at all, and that came up as part of the jury verdict. Uh, you also need to understand that individual jury verdicts at trial are not precedent. They are not binding on other courts. So this is not going to start juries are ruled that and it have any sway on other juries whatsoever. Um, I made enemies in the law enforcement training world over refusing to approve the 320 back when I was in such a position. Now, that was back in the time before the 2018 recall and the like. And then kept getting reports of incidents uh, coming coming down the pike. Now, I know some of those are, in fact, where firing objects got into the holster, big wide gaps to accommodate weapon lights. Uh, Something like I know in one instance, a strap from a medical bag got into a holster and discharged the pistol. Um, so there were several of those, and I just until there were definitive answers, I didn't want to go down the road and prove it, and that made me some enemies. And I don't feel vindicated in the least about what's happening right now. I'm actually more sorely disappointed that we're at this point. but something is going on with the pistol. And one retort that I constantly hear was, "Well, I haven't ever had any problem with mine." Well, then neither did the other people right up until they had theirs with theirs. The jury verdict that came out this week from a Boston area agency, what I could find online today, said that this was the fourth such discharge in that agency. Okay, they knew they had a problem. Um,
And
Now,
the officer was carrying appendix without a holster.
without a holster, that's not really a gun problem. That's
May not be
more,
a gun problem.
yeah. Go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just gonna say it may not be a gun problem, right? And you
Right.
talked about the shoulder strap going into the holster. There's one incident where I've got some pretty in-depth knowledge as to what happened
Mm-hmm.
with it, right? Because of an associate of mine being involved in doing the air quotes autopsy,
Right.
closed air quote on the event. If it was just an issue of holster design, we would see it happening with other guns.
Yeah.
In proportion to their presence in the LE world. And we're not seeing that. I know last year there was a big discussion about openings on holsters and stuff. We've had our discussions about US duty gear. I've been
Mm-hmm.
very happy with everything I've gotten from them. And I could not get a pinky, part of a pinky, into a holster that was designed for a pistol with the light on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at least theirs aren't having that design issue. Now I imagine there's other ones that are, and I was reading a thing today where one well-known company's holsters were designed to accommodate lights from multiple companies. Well, if you're making a one size fits all, then you have to accommodate out to the largest light.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can see that being a concern.
Yeah. Looking at something like the Safari Vault or its offshoot, the Solus, and then looking at, say, the Rapid Force gear stuff, I don't see where anything can be getting into those holsters. But when you look at some of the old Safari 7000, 6000 series stuff, absolutely. Uh, you can actually see the trigger on some of the SIGs. And even with the Glock, you can reach in and touch the trigger. I haven't tried it with an M&P. Um, I do have multiple US duty gear holsters, and for one with the light, I can reach my index finger in and touch the side of the trigger on a Glock. Um, so I think every manufacturer is capable of doing
Mhm.
it depending on their overall design. But to your point, Eric, and that's one of my constant rebuttals on the other side of this is, why isn't it happening with Glock, M&P,
Yep.
H&K?
H&K, Beretta
Yeah,
APXs,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
there's plenty of other polymer frame striker fired guns out there that it's not happening with.
yeah. And Glock's had its issues in the early 2000s. There was an issue with unsupported chambers was the big thing online, and they were going to all blow apart constantly. And I did see multiple Glocks blow apart in a class, but that issue got resolved. And it was usually every time I saw it happen was with reloaded ammunition.
Man,
Um,
almost was only for 40s.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a 40 cal issue. We saw it. Those right. Then we had the weapon mounted light issue,
Mm-hmm.
and that was one of the things that drove agencies back to the 9mm totality of those.
Well, two of the Glocks that I saw quote kabam were Glock 9mm.
Okay.
But it was with reloaded ammo, and it was from the same lot of ammo as well, um, or the same manufacturer. Glock addressed those problems,
Mhm.
and you just don't
Exactly.
hear. And
Yep.
there occasionally things crop up with
Frozen
Glock,
again.
but Glock fixes them. Problems
There
that
you
they
are.
only
You
get
came
one
back.
Glock
You were gone for a bit, Lee.
fix. Yeah, yeah. All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say you were gone for a bit. So
Okay, I'm getting an internet unstable, so I'm gonna switch it over to my phone's hotspot. Hold on just a second.
That's what I did. So let me address Glock too, because I've had a lot of experience with Glocks back in the 80s. In 1989, 1990, when the Glock 21 and 20 were put out. I was doing a demonstration of one out at Arizona Post at Phoenix PD range, had a Glock 20 and 10 millimeter, and with a whole bunch of witnesses. I'm left-handed and I had my hand on the gun. Obviously, my finger was straight, and I worked the slide. And as soon as I let go of the slide, the gun went off by itself. And I'm looking at my finger, and they're looking, and yeah, it wasn't on there. Shortly after that, Glock came out with their refit kit because their frying pin safeties were failing. And at that time, Glock stepped up to the plate in a way that I've never seen a manufacturer do. You sent them as an agency the number of Glocks you had in your agency and the type of Glock, and they sent you brand new firing control systems out of the gun, from triggers to firing pins, firing pin safety, everything for free, no questions asked. Just jumped into it and handled the problem, and they haven't had a problem with that. As you said, the transition over to a light rail and their guns, especially in the 40s, had a lot of feed issues, of which they didn't address right away, but they finally did in the form of coming out with a different recoil spring and to decelerate the slides on the guns and different frame design. Some of that was caused because of ATS regulations of how to mount their serial number on the polymer frame. I know some of that came out of it. There were a bad batch of slides where they were ripping out the rails on a series of 40s in about 93, 94. I think they
Later
had
than
some.
that, because we
That
bought
even
ours in 97, and I remember
yeah,
doing that switch out like 2000, 2001.
with the frames or the
Yeah, the frame, the bad right rear frame rail.
right. So, but Glock over the years has addressed the issue and tried to fix it. Now they may have reluctantly done it, and you know it gets more expensive the more guns you got out there, but at least they've done that. Uh, the SIG issue is one that I'm just like shaking my head at, because I invested into SIG pretty early on when the military adopted the 320 into the M18 and M17, because I wanted to have one because I teach military classes. So I wanted to have one. And I've owned SIGs ever since the 80s. I had a 225, 226, 228, 250, multiple 220s. And I've always liked SIGs. I've always been a great gun. And then I bought a 250 when those first came out, which is their double action version using their polymer frame. And then when the 320 came out, I sold the 250 and went to the 320 with that purpose of carrying it. With all of the things that have gone on with it, I personally feel I don't want to risk it. My holster does not have a weapon mounted light. My holster completely covers the rear guard. It is a 4-lamp holster, but it's not for a weapon mounted light. So the trigger is completely covered. But there's just a lot of smoke, and I don't see a lot of the explanations being given being acceptable to every single incident where these things have gone off, and it's always something that goes inside the trigger guard and pulls the trigger. I personally think it'd be an easy fix for SIG if they just put a trigger safety in it like a Glock, but I don't know why they don't want to do that. So I don't know. I won't carry it, and I won't issue students because I don't feel like I can accept that liability to a student. And it's just something that I wish I would do because I invested heavily in it with magazines, you know, over $1,000 in equipment for the SIG 320 or 320s. And it's been sitting in the safe for almost 2 years now. And I put quite a few rounds through mine, but I just won't carry it because right now I just have a trust issue. So they come up with something to fix it.
Yeah.
So that's me on that part.
Yeah. Eric, any thoughts?
We don't know how common it is because not a lot of people have the guns loaded all the time and on them, right? It could be a 1 in 10,000 issue, it could be a 1 in 10 issue, right? I just don't know the numbers versus the numbers that were sold versus the numbers that loaded in LE holsters. Yeah, I know that there have been deaths on the civilian side of things, right? So it does go to a carry argument. I have my thoughts, but I'm not an engineer, so it's thoughts from an armor user perspective, not informed from an engineering perspective. Totality of circumstances, right? I get it if an agency says this is our issue gun, we've chosen to go with it, right? If you're working with that agency, you're going to have to deal with that. You can't get them to go change guns just for a class or training. But for people who choose to carry that package, I don't right now think that it makes sense to carry it until we know a lot more about what's going on and there's a fix for it. And that is the that's the position my company took. And I know I'm not the only one that's done it. I've watched it start back in April of this year with the first company that said we're not allowing these in classes anymore, and it's progressed since then. It's not something that just started in the last 2 weeks.
Right.
I've bought a new 250 or used 250 to supplement so I can first off use my gear that I bought, all the mags and all that stuff interchanges. And also, if a student does come to one of my classes with 320, I'm going to ask them to use the 250 instead. The system's simple enough and uh, similar enough that I don't think it's going to be a big issue for them, but it'll make me feel better at it. I don't know how well the companies that are the place I go to teach what their rules are going to be. I'm going to rely on their rules when I go to an agency or something like that to do it. But my own personal classes, I'll recommend loaning them a 250, and I'll just give them my gun. That way, I don't have to worry about it. I won't loan my 320 out. I won't loan it out. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I'm hoping that something comes out of it where I can honestly feel I can trust it again and want to shoot it because I did like it and I like shooting it when I was shooting it. But like I said, I just don't feel comfortable with it now.
And if you look, IDPA just pulled them till further notice.
Yeah.
And the founders of IDPA have a close tie to SIG, right? At least in terms of accessories. So they've invested a bunch in that. There are now, I'm seeing holster manufacturers and people who sell parts coming out saying, we're not selling holsters for that design, and we're not selling parts for that design. Right. So this is more than a few trainers or a few agencies saying we're not comfortable with this. Now, could it be a situation where it's just a snowball effect, right? Where people have seen it and everybody's doing it because somebody else is, not because they've done a deep dive into it themselves. I don't know that's possible, right? But I think at this point, until the collective, we know a whole lot more about what has caused that and why. I think there's some pretty reasonable decisions being made,
Mm-hmm.
and SIG threatening to sue various entities
You
over their positions may not be the best course of action going forward.
no, I don't think it's a good public relation thing. That's for sure.
Yeah.
The IDPA decision, I think, is the biggest one. It's precisely from Wilson Combat's relationship with SIG and how much 320 stuff they were offering. Matter of fact, when even before this latest snowball, when I was having qualms about the 320, I actually almost bought one of the Wilson Combat ones under the theory that, well, Wilson's gunsmiths have gone over it. And if there
Mm-hmm.
was an obvious thing, they would have found it here. And then I'd say, you know what? Nah, I'm just not going to do that. So I think that relationship is key with Wilson's deciding to pull the plug for now. Well, Wilson in the name of IDPA. I'm still just so uneasy with it. And I think back, I got a text message yesterday from one of our mutual gun friends. So, aren't you glad that you dallied with the CZP-10 instead of the 320? And I think back to when the 320 first came on the market. Um, I was in our local cop shop and was over at the LE counter. And they had left me to handle and play with a 320 carry while they were off dealing with other customers. And I'm handling this 320 carry, and I'm out in there with my sheriff, and I'm like, I'm going to buy this. This trigger on this gun is great. I'm going to do this. And they were so busy that day that it was taking so long for someone to get over to help me, to do the 4473, that I just put it back in the counter and we left. And I told the sheriff, I said, you know what? I'm going to wait until this design has some water under it just to see if any problems pop up. And then every time as I got to the point where, okay, I'm ready to go ahead and flip the switch on one of these and go with it, something else would come out. And so I've always stayed away from it. Um, there's just too many other designs that don't have the baggage.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So why play with it? Why risk it? Um, you know, and again, I don't know what is causing the issues. I am not persuaded by these YouTube videos or somebody's, well, if you wiggle the slide just this way and press the trigger just this much and do all of these things, yes, I can make the striker fall. I don't know that that's all happening in the holster. So I don't think that you can say that's part of the problem. Back from the, last week's episode was about traditional double actions. Well,
Right.
I can defeat the magazine safety on the third generation Smith and Wesson pistol for one shot,
Right.
but you have to go through some pretty significant gymnastics to do it, and I just don't see that happening as it's being carried around in the holster. I can see it happening in the ground fight. We're talking about the Smith issue there, but other than that, I don't see it as. I never saw it as an issue. Eric, you were going to say something?
So on the manipulations and the gun going bang,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot think of anything I've seen done with a Glock that
Mm-hmm.
had that result.
Right.
I've been an M&P guy going back to 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot recall seeing any kind of manipulations that resulted in an unscheduled, uncommanded firing event like that, right?
Right.
With factory parts, I assume.
Yeah, with factory parts. Right now, I'm not now. There's other guns I'm aware of, other things happening with, right? But like, I won't bring them up because I know in one case, well, in two cases with one gun, they had trigger jobs done on them afterwards, right? Like,
Right.
okay, don't know what the parts were, the tolerances, or anything else, so not going down that road. I'm just talking about stock guns and duty rigs. The series incident, right? You just watch a school resource officer walk out of school, backpack is slung over the shoulder on the gun side. She walks up to the car door, does that move that we've all done, where you pop the shoulder
Mm-hmm.
out and let the pack go to the ground, and the gun discharges when it does. Right? Okay. Seen that done countless people with countless different weapons and not seeing that there. So something's going on with movement of the
Right.
gun in
Mm-hmm.
ways that may not necessarily be static in the holster, right? So, like I said, I don't know what's going on. I just know what we keep seeing.
Right. But
Well,
go right back to your point earlier. Why are we not seeing it
Yes.
with Glocks, MMPs,
Yeah. I can't count the
Berettas?
number. When I worked courts, I can't count the number of times I walked to and from the courthouse with a day pack on, right
Mm-hmm.
over a shoulder, with my lunch, with stuff to read because I'm going to be in the courthouse for 8-10 hours that day, right? This is in
Yeah.
retirement.
Yeah.
And I know multiple times I just let that pack slide off the shoulder, right? Nothing ever happened. So yes, nobody has come up with a cause yet, right? And I think that's what's concerning to
Yeah.
everybody is we can't isolate the issue, but it's continuing to happen. So I'll leave it at that.
some of the stuff that has come up with the FBI's uh, firearms unit that has report on the one from Michigan State Police, it put a lot of effort in showing it, but they had to modify the gun to show why it was doing it. So I don't know if that had effect on it. But it's, like I said, there's just so much smoke, and we don't see the smoke with the other guns.
Right.
That's my issue with it too. The one that bothers me probably the most of any of these now is the newest one from the Air Force, where the desk officer took his gun off by using the forks on his Safariland rig, put the holster on his desk, and it's sitting on his desk for whatever reason, I guess, was pointed at him. I don't know why. And the gun goes off while it's sitting on the desk. At least that's the report as it initially came out. The Air Force is doing an investigation, and I don't know what the end result will be, but you shouldn't have to worry about your gun going off
Yeah.
in the holster. And that's
Yeah.
seems to be an issue, whether it is or isn't. It seems to be, like I said, too much smoke. So I don't need it. I have it, but I don't need it. So therefore, I'm not using it.
Yeah. I had a question from a member of the audience about, okay, well, is the 365 good to go? To my knowledge, there are not being any incidences of uncommanded discharges, if that's the term you want to use, with the 365. It is a different design than the 320. The only instance that I'm hearing about with the 365 is that the trigger return springs are showing a tendency to break at about 2,500 trigger presses. That's not 2,500 live
Oh,
rounds. That's 2,500
oh,
trigger presses. So if you're doing dry fire, those presses would count. Um, but I don't know of any safety reason to set aside the 365 other than it is a fully tension striker with no trigger safety, no whatever. So you're walking around basically cocked, unlocked. Um, but again, I'm not seeing a lot of problems with those. Now, I did go heavy into the 365 macro tac ops when they came out because it's 18 rounds in the pistol the same size as a Glock 48. What I am finding is that I cannot shoot it to the same level that I shoot the Glock 48 for whatever reason. And when I've gone to swip grip modules or whatever, that little bitty part falls out. It takes forever to get it right back in. And I don't run into that stuff with Glocks because I'm not swapping the trigger parts out to other modules and stuff. I bought those 365s also as part of our protest, and the fact that Glock was not selling the Glock 19 with the direct milled optic and was not selling the 48 with the direct milled optic. Now they do. So I can foresee myself going to a Glock 48 with a KOA on it and ultimately phasing out the 365 stuff. But that's just a choice for me. I shoot Glocks better and I feel much more comfortable in taking a Glock apart. The other thing is we've already talked about Glock being proactive. I have a Glock 45 direct milled for an acro from the factory. I was not satisfied with the trigger press and the fact that the trigger is so good that the wall disappeared. And I mentioned it to a person very connected with Glock, and 3 new connectors showed up in the mail for me. Yeah, I don't have that relationship with Sig. I do with Glock. And
Funny thing is, I have that with
yeah,
Glock too, and I
for
am
me,
not
I want to
a Glockophile.
right.
no, you're not.
And it's like say it's not special to me. I know Glock does it for other people.
Yeah.
Um, I, I say this, there's that line from it's a Cody Jinks song, and it was in um, the Kevin Costner movie where he went and smoked those murderous bandits, the highwaymen. Yeah, outlaws and Mustangs always come home. Well, I always come back to the Glock 19, and no matter how often I try to leave it, I come back. Um, I love my CZ P10Cs. I shoot them across the board better than I do my Glock products. However, um, I had an instance of the recoil springs in both of my P10Cs give up the ghost in the same class. Now, I probably pushed them a little too far. I should have swapped them out sooner than I did. But it actually took a little effort to find the recoil springs to replace them. It wasn't like the millions of Glock web pages out there that sell them, or me just picking up a phone and they're arriving. Um, then at a local club match here a few weeks ago, I have all of a sudden the magazine wouldn't stay in my pistol. And I don't know whether it is the mag catch or the mag spring, but I don't run into that kind of stuff with Glock. And when I do have a minor issue, it's an easy fix. I keep going back to the Glock 19. But for people that don't want to go that route, what would you suggest? Or then if you have anything on the 365 that I didn't do.
If I was going to go with the 365 route, it would be box stock triggers. Um, my preference is the M&P, right? But if you told me tomorrow you're limited to one handgun and one handgun only, looking at the support that's available, it pains me to say it. I'd probably go with the Glock 19, right? But the M&P compact, 2.0 compact to me is just fine. H&K has some promising stuff. The unfortunate part has been the accessories for it, right? As much as I like a VP9, at the time, last time I made a switch on guns, there was almost no support stuff available for that pistol. I
Hardly
understand
any holsters.
it's better now, and it's unfortunately it's that way with all the H&K stuff. Yeah, that's probably my position on it. The M&P would be my choice for a number of reasons, but like I would not argue against a Glock 19 or a similar size pistol from H&K or larger.
Mark?
like you, I have not heard any problems with the 365. I do know of an incident where one discharged in the holster, but in researching it, it was apparently clothing that got in the holster also. And while the gun was holstered, apparently this person raised their hands to show they were clear, and I guess that was enough to pull the shirt up, and which in turn pulled the trigger on the gun. But so it did not sound like that was a gun issue; that was a clothing issue, and that's happened with Glocks. I know of at least two
Yeah.
cases where one was some worked for FBI. I think it was task force. He was a sheriff deputy. Had a raid jacket, and the string with the tie on his raid jacket got into the holster and the trigger guard. And when he went to take his jacket off, it was sticking, and so he yanked on the cord, and it pulled the trigger on his Glock and set it off. And again, that's
Yeah.
not a gun issue. That is a foreign matter in the trigger. And same thing with another deputy. Showed a picture of it. He had a leather holster that got soft on him. It was more of a belt slide, and he'd put it in the holster. The leather had curled down under and apparently got in the trigger. And when he sat down and put his seatbelt on, that put enough pressure on the trigger to set the gun off. So if you pull the trigger on the gun, they're going to go off. There's nothing you can do to stop that. No manual safeties, then it's just not going to go. I was going to say on the 365, did you go with the manual safety one, and does that have a positive block of the trigger, or is it block of the firing pin? Because I'm not familiar with the gun. I am not a 365 guy. I don't have one. I don't want one after the 320 stuff. It's just there, and they just don't fit my hand well. I know there's a lot of different modules for it, but I found no reason not to use the Glock 43X or 48 for a small compact gun. It works just fine for me, and I'm a Glock guy, and I will admit that I'm a tried and true Glock guy. I've had one since '88 with a Gen 1, and I put 186,000 rounds through it. You're talking about recoil springs giving up the ghost. I didn't change my first recoil spring out until 86,000 rounds, and I didn't do it because I gun quit working. I did it because when I took it apart for a match to clean it, I found the locking block had broke on the gun. It was still going, but it was the locking block was broke, and it traced back to me not changing out the recoil spring for 87,000 rounds. And that was my fault for doing it, but I was doing it at that time. What Glock was talking about was doing the full slide back, hold the trigger back, and then went to battery. The spring was fine. Now I change them out about every 10,000 rounds, and don't have any. I've never had any issues since then. But my
It,
Glocks have had a few parts broken over the years, and I've shot. Like I said, I got that one with 186,000 rounds on it when I retired it in 2018 for a Glock 19X, and it still runs today. I just thought it was time for it to give it a break after 30 years.
yeah, it was not until the late 00s, like '07, that Glock even said their parts had service lives on them from the armorers classes. And I can
Right.
remember Dennis Tooler standing in our training room telling us, okay, there's now a service life on those parts. We're like, wait, there wasn't one 2 years ago. Well, it was all part of the 40 cal issue. It finally came out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And 40s won't last as long because of the pressures.
Mm-hmm.
I've still got my original 40 that I bought in 1992 that I went with and carried for, I think it was 3.5 years before we went to issue Glocks. And we went with when the rail had just come out, Gen 3s had just come out. I chose to stay with the Gen 2. It would be the Gen 2 without the rail. Glad we did because all the problems, because we had nothing but 40s across the board, all the problems with the flashlight rails and stuff that Chuck Hager and I talked about during that time span. He and I were on the phone probably once or twice a week talking about the issues with that particular system. And I'm glad we went with non-flashlight rail guns until they got that worked out. But now they got it worked out. The guns work fine.
Yeah.
I have a Gen 3.9 and it works fine. And I never had an issue with it. Doesn't hit my hand as well as the new ones, but it works fine. I have no complaints with it. If I Lee, you're asking about guns, a new kid on the block that I have to say I like, made in my own hometown of Prescott, is the new RXM from Ruger, which is basically a Gen 3 Glock with a grip module very similar to the 320 that Magpul is making, and will fortunately be coming out soon with a full size and a Glock 26 size frame that you can put most Glock parts in and make it run at a very reasonable price. And I have shot now a little over 500 rounds through mine, no issues at all. It runs great. It's got a good trigger, as good a trigger as any Glock has. and I like the fact that it uses the simpler Gen 3 parts. So it may be a winner down the line, but that's certainly one to look at in my opinion. Um, as long as we keep their quality control up on it, I think it's going to be a great gun. I will say I did see one issue, and Ruger stepped up the plate. One of my students up in Wyoming had one, had a holosun on it, and the holosun just fractured off of it and went flying. And those are direct mounts. And he contacted Ruger. Ruger said, no problem, and sent him a brand new slide. Didn't even question it, just sent him a slide. And he took pictures of the thing and sent it to him, and they just sent him a new slide. So I don't know if that's indicative of anything. I haven't heard any other issues for it, but I'm looking forward to get the full-size grip module because then I'll have a 19X size gun with Gen 3 parts, and that's kind of exciting to me. I'm excited. I'm easily excitable, though.
You know, I mentioned it when Spalding was on a few weeks back that I handled the full size Magpul module for that gun and really liked it. And I'm a 19 guy over a 17/45 guy. But Magpul got that right. I also mentioned then that I think that Holosun SCS with the Delta Point footprint, um, directly mounting that on top of that RXM gives you an enclosed optic that you don't have to deal with batteries. And that would be a great training gun, I think. I just think that setup will be pretty cool. Um, I would probably already have gone and bought an RXM and gone that route, except for I've gotten back into shooting Glock matches. And so if I'm going to shoot Glocks, I might as well shoot Glocks.
And if they're not black, you can't get away with it because somebody will notice it.
Right. And that's the Henry Ford was right. You can have any color you want as long as it's black. And I don't understand this whole, it comes in stealth gray. And if you want this other, you got to buy another frame. Ah, drives me nuts. Excuse me.
Well, I think, like I say, I think Ruger's working on that. It's I say only thing I can say is that the patents must have expired on the Gen 3 parts for Glocks because
Yeah.
every part I tried, I changed slides and put it on the Gen 3 gun. I put the RXM stuff on Gen 3 Glocks, and they work just fine. And it fits all my holsters, which makes me very
Yeah.
happy that it fits all my holsters. I don't have to buy a new holster or a new set of holsters. Fits all my magazines. For me, it's a win-win. I like it. Like I just can't wait for the full-size grip module to come out because I'll have a
Yeah.
Glock 45, like I said, or a Glock 19X, depending on what color I want to get it in and be good to go. So I'm just waiting. I literally look every day on Magpul's site to see if they've got those grip modules available. They don't, but they say coming soon.
Yeah. Um, I know Walter is supposed to have a PDP-F coming out with direct mill for an acro package. That would seem to be interesting, except for it's a fully tensioned striker. So you're walking around cocked unlocked. Uh, and that gun to me has a good bit of muzzle flip in it. Now I know you get on the Walther forums or start talking to those people and like, well, you can change the recoil spring from the 18-pound spring to the 15-round spring, and they sell a tungsten guide rod. Okay, well now you're adding significantly to the cost of the gun.
I
That's a
carried a
running part.
1911 for 20 years. Why do I want to start mixing and matching springs and
Yeah,
guide rods? I want a gun
yeah,
that, with the exception of maybe going to a cleaner fire control group, right? Because I'm an
yeah,
MP Apex guy, right? I really don't think you need it on the 2.0s, right? Other
right.
than maybe that, I don't want to have to do any work to the gun.
Yeah. And it used to always burn me up, or still burns me up when people try to tell me, well, you can take the gun and you can do this to it. And I was like, I want it to come out of the box the way I want it. I don't want to buy and spend more money on it just to get it to where it's where I want it to be. Um, yeah, like with optics, people get, you can have it milled for this, milled for. I don't want to have it milled. I want it to come out of the box and be able to put the optic I want on top of it. Uh, I, I should get what I want. This is 2025 and this is America.
Exactly. So on the Glock Gen 5s, I like them out of the box with one exception. I hate the ambidextrous slide stop because for 30 plus years, my thumb has ridden right exactly where that is on the right hand side of the gun. And now that they've got the slide stop there, I don't lock the slide back because I'm holding it down. So I just grind them off because I don't need them. As a left-hander, I don't need the thing, so I don't even bother with it. Which is one thing I like about the RXM, it doesn't have that on it. I don't have to modify that. I did modify my gun, the 320, by grinding off their ambidextrous one too, because again, I was holding the slide stop down and not getting a slide lock back. But all we did was take the lever off of it, so it didn't really modify the gun other than just taking that thing down. And that's just me. I'm old and I don't want to change my ways.
We should mention that both Mark and Eric have their hands on backwards. They are both lefties, and so they run into problems that the rest of the world doesn't run into.
Okay,
Um,
let me explain this. We survived the nuns. The rest of you gave in, right? We held out. Go
yeah,
back to your trash talk, Lee.
it's funny you talking about that with the ambidextrous slide stop. I've been shooting the Gen 5 for several years now. I also have two Shadow Systems pistols, and I have one that I was using in a class as a student, and it called for a support hand only reload under time. And I was shooting my Shadow version of whatever. So I think the XR 920, so the same thing as a Glock 45. And I got the magazine in, was bringing it up, was about to extend and send the slide home, and my thumb was going for where the slide stop is supposed to be on the ejection port side of the gun. I'm like, oh yeah, this gun doesn't have an ambidextrous slide stop, and I had to
Actually, it does. It
had
just
to
uses
resort to other means at that point. What's that?
if you're, as a
What was that, Mark?
left-hander team is an ambidextrous gun. It is fine. You don't need your trigger finger works just fine to release the slide, and you
Yeah.
know what? It's not an issue. I
Well,
can't help it if you write it.
back in the days of Gen 3, I didn't even think about it. If I had the gun in my left hand and I had to send the slide home, I'd just reach up the trigger finger and boop, hit it forward. But I've been shooting, like I said, the Gen 5 for several years. And as I was coming up, like fixing to extend out to the target, was going to send the slide home, I'm like, oh, yeah, it's not there. How do I do this again? Oh, yeah. And I took that extra, millisecond to stop and think about it versus just doing it. And it just amused me. But the next day I shot a Gen 5 and didn't have to worry about that. So now,
You
Eric,
know,
you were
gun.
talking about the M&P. I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No, wait, go to Eric first. I'll talk about something in a minute. Wait.
I was going to say, talking about the M&Ps, I had an M&P 45 back in the day that I absolutely love, an absolute tax driver. But I kept having problems with the magazine springs, that they would give up the ghost. And like you'd press the trigger and get a click, do a tap rack, press the trigger, get a click, lock the slide back and look, and the spring had broken and all the rounds were just down in the bottom of the magazine, sitting on top of the
Was that
follower.
the follower binding,
It
or
was
was that the actual spring breaking?
the spring breaking.
Okay.
Numerous times Smith told me, oh, this is the latest, greatest new spring. Make sure you get the one that's colored purple, or make sure you get the one that's colored blue, or whatever. And I kept having issues with it. So finally I gave up on the platform. And that's kind of soured me to the M&P. I did try a 2.0 when it first came out and then got rid of it pretty quickly. I've seen with particularly in the competitor model, people, they have the plastic or the polymer mag catch in them, and the
Mhm.
magazines are chewing through that like within 5,000 rounds. And so people are having to constantly change those or just trying to find a metal one to put in there. And I have seen some reports of trigger return springs breaking on the MMPs.
Okay.
But
Have a wide variety of them bought over years and haven't seen that, right? So it's not like I went out and bought 10 and they were all like sequential serial numbers. They were all spread out.
yeah,
Um, I haven't seen it. Not saying it doesn't happen, right? Just
right.
not my experience with them.
Well, someone we both know very well has had the trigger return spring break on two pistols.
Is that the guy who has match sets, one for teaching and one for carry?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he was having the same issue with the mag catch. I saw it happening with another instructor in which we were both in the same class. Was happening to his pistols. Magazines kept falling out. And I watched the walker and said, is that the original polymer mag catch? He goes, yeah. How'd you know? Well, that's probably why your mag are falling out. Um, So my P10C, all of a sudden the issue popped up, and I just have not taken the mag catch out yet to see if it's the catch or the spring. I'm hoping it's the $5 spring rather
Mhm.
than the $60 mag catch. Um, but the P10C, I've had two issues in both either class and competition where it just all of a sudden popped up. And now I've lost confidence in the guns.
I will say this, I don't care what gun you carry.
Mm-hmm.
You probably should do your best to get to an armorer's class or get with somebody who's an experienced armorer and have them show you how to detail strip the gun,
Mm-hmm.
do it several times under their tutelage, and
Yeah.
then know what to change out and when, and get those parts. And if you can't go to Brownells or the manufacturer or a
Mm-hmm.
similar website and buy those parts, strongly consider maybe not carrying that gun.
Yeah.
That make
And
them
that's the thing. While it's expired right now, I am certified armorer on the Glock,
Mhm.
and I don't have a problem taking it apart and changing anything. Because my goodness, there can't be a simpler gun to work on than those.
I, I've been to Glock Armor School every 3 years consistently since 1989.
Yeah.
Every 3 years I've gone to it. And that's one thing I like about the Glocks. And with what Eric said, I have to agree. If I were limited to one pistol, that I could only have one, as much as I love my revolvers, because I'm a big revolver guy, is I would have a Glock,
Yeah.
because with a handful of parts, it'll run the rest of my lifetime and I never have to worry about it. And that's one advantage of that gun, is the support for it is tremendous that you can find it. Now there's a lot of junk parts out there, and I've had students who've bought them
Yeah.
and put them in the guns and had nothing but issues with them. And I'm not saying that Glock is not the perfection is not a correct word, but they're about as reliable gun as you're going to find, and the support for parts and stuff can be found literally worldwide. It's the most
Yeah.
prolific handgun in the world today, without question. Glock 17, Glock 19 style guns are the most prolific. I don't think there's a gun out there that's been made more than they have, and it's not worldwide like they are. So
it's
that
about the AK in the handgun world.
it is.
Yeah.
That's a good way to describe it. Or the Smith and Wesson Model 10 of the semi-auto world. It's the most
Yeah.
prolific gun out there.
I will say this: I am very much desiring a hammer fired 9, and I can't decide what I want to go with. Uh, Robert, probably right now, the leader in the clubhouse is a Beretta 92 from Langland. Um, but I just don't know what I want.
If they
Uh,
made a commander sized version of that, DAO.
I'm pretty sure, based on the conversation with Ernest last week, that he could do you a double action only version. I'm sure you could get a compact done that way as well.
Yeah, well, okay, sidebar. For law enforcement, I have this
Yeah,
theory
yeah,
that a DAO pistol with a Langdon trigger, an optic, and a weapon mounted light that has the old Filster arc switches on it, as well as a DG switch, for what we ask street cops to do,
mm-hmm.
is probably the way to go, because my Langdon Beretta is under a 7.5 pound trigger. It is clean. All I want's a clean trigger, right? But he got it down to a 7.5, and it's clean. A DAO with that, for what we're asking guys and gals to do on the street in uniform. Yeah, I understand. Like, no, I want short, fast, this, that, and the other thing,
Yeah.
which we may hit on other topics, but like, I think it's a proof of concept gun that I want to look at.
He told me that if it was a DAO gun, that he could actually get the trigger a little lighter than what he does on the TDA guns.
Okay.
And he just announced this week a new hammer that he's come out with. It's going to be able to take probably another half-pound off
Okay.
the DA pull.
Well, that would put it down in the range of a Glock, a current Glock, or an MMP,
Yeah,
which is really hard to argue against.
yeah. Magazine fed K frame just has an appeal to me.
I relate that to one gun I like, which I know a lot of people don't. One of my other favorite semi-autos out there is the Ruger P95 in DAO and the P97 in DAO. Both of those, in my opinion, are some of Ruger's best products out. The trigger pull on that thing was smooth and consistent. It was reliable. It would run. I just said it was a 16 shot double action revolver, and I love mine. I've got multiple of them. I use several of them in classes, and again, favorite. Another one we're talking about Berettas. I like the PX4 Storm. I think that's a great gun, an underrated gun. It does well in the either double action only or their C configuration, which is a partially cocked hammer version, which is what I have. It's slick slided. There's no sharp edges. Almost my complaint with the PX4 was the fact that the safety on it had more edges on it than my Swiss Army knife, and just cut the crap out of students when they would play with it. So I really like the PX4 Storm. I think it's an excellent gun, either in the double action only mode. I don't know what their model number is, but I have what they call the C, which is a constant trigger, and it is a double action, but it's a pre-cocked hammer at about 2/3 of the way cocked, and then you cock it the rest of the way. And it's a very nice gun, and I like that one a lot. There's several prisons that I teach for private prisons that use that gun, and that's why I have it. They have the double action, single action with the safeties, but I like that PX4 Storm for that reason. And they also make a carbine in it. They'll take the carbine magazine, so if you want one gun to fit all, that's not a bad choice either.
See Eric shaking his head.
I'm developing a class that I will need a 9mm carbine for as option, but that would not be the first choice. If you're going to do that, just go buy a 9mm subgun, right? Be honest about it. Don't put 9mm into a 16-inch rifle.
I have those, Eric.
I know Marlin made them, and they ran off 5906 magazines. Yeah.
I got the Ruger PCCs, and they run off Glock magazines, and I absolutely love that rifle. And I've got original PC9, which runs off of the P95 magazines, and I love that rifle. Those guns are just really neat little guns to shoot, and I like them a lot. But
I'm not talking about behind the bedroom door guns, right? I am talking about when you get bad administrators who decide that that's going to be the answer to a patrol rifle.
It could be worse. I think it could be
you
worse.
Not have one in the car.
Right. I think it's a good option. The AR-15 9mm runs reliably. Is a simpler system and is compatible with things. I know why people want 223 and 5.56. I understand that, but the 9mm does a good job, and all of the carbines that are out there for them, very popular now. The AR carbines for them, just they run great, and you can shoot them, and it's more economical. It gives you one round of ammo to shoot, but that you got to be careful of, because out of a rifle barrel, some of your lighter bullets will explode in a target versus penetrate. So you got to be careful about your ammunition choices. But it's a viable system. I would not poo-poo it if an agency I work for said we're going to go to 9mm carbines. I would want selective ammo for it. Like I said, I think it'd be a fine system. My opinion.
I had one of the original PC9s that used the P95 mags, and I had a P95 decock model. And I had set up a belt that I had both a vertical and a horizontal mag pouch on it. So I had 4 mags on the belt, and I had that butt cuff on the PC9 that had 2 more mags. And, if I threw that belt on, I had a lot of spare ammunition. I could run around with that gun, and ultimately I sold it off when I went all Glock. But
Yeah, I mean,
had no issues whatsoever.
my point.
I did not shoot the P95 as well as I would have liked to. I loved the gun. It just I could not run it to the same level that I ran the Smith that I
It's
was shooting before or the Glock after.
I've ever shot as far as recoil, because it's got a massive slide on it.
Yeah.
It does sit higher in the hand, so you can get some more muzzle flip. But it's like I say, as far as recoil wise, it's extremely soft. And out of the rifles, there is no recoil. I mean, they use low heavy bolts and tungsten weights and counterweights and stuff to make them run. But I mean, the guns run very well. They're very reliable. I think I have cleaned my PCs, the new PCC carbine, maybe 4 times, and I have put thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds through it. Like an AR, if you keep it wet, it'll run. It doesn't need a lot of lubrication to run. And that's one reason why I like the gun. I have two of them now. One of the packbacker versions from Magpul, and then the original one. But they're a sweet rifle. I have no complaints with them at all. But I am a big pistol caliber carbine guy. I always have been for both revolvers and for the autos.
Well, the Magnificent Steve has one of the new PC9s that is adapted to take Glock mags, and I've shot it some, and I like it fine for what it is.
I've got one of the PCCs. I've got the adapter so it'll take Glock mags. I had it as a behind the bedroom door for a few years, right? I've gone back to a shotgun for all that niche stuff, but there's nothing wrong with that gun, right? Just the one thing about it bugs me is the location of the safety in comparison to an AR. But
Yeah,
Being
and
you and I being ambidextrous, I put an aftermarket flip safety on it that rotates similar to the safety on the M1 carbine. It's located front and it's ambidextrous, so I can put my trigger finger on it straight, just like I would any other gun, and push it forward as I go to the trigger, and it's worked well for me. So I'm kind of pleased with that. So that may be something to consider there, Eric.
yeah, I can see it in place of people who may have issue with shooting a 12 gauge.
mm-hmm.
That would be
Oh
a
yeah,
good option for them to go to. Um, Speaking of the Magnificent Steve, he asked this for today's show. Presuming that there's no change in the test or standards, will changes in technology or equipment bring improvement, or will they just allow people to meet the standards with less effort? Who
both.
wants to, well, go ahead with it.
So I think people will be able will get better performance, which gets them over the standard hump, right? I prefer we get them there through work, repetition, and willingness, right? But some of the technology is going to make it easier for people to meet the standard. Um, yeah, there's your answer. The short answer.
Mark?
I think there's not going to be any replacement for practice and consistency of training. You're not going to come up with a magic pill unless we get a guided bullet, put somebody's DNA on if you know you're going to
Mhm.
shoot. I mean, it's still going to require all the same basics, the fundamentals to do it. You guys know that I'm into red dots, but I'm not into red dots for my own personal use. I understand their purpose, but I'm still out on this as a general purpose for everybody gun sight system, because the guys who are not gun guys, they won't maintain them, and unless somebody sits on them and enforces them to maintain them, they don't take their guns out of the holsters when they get off work. They don't
No.
draw the gun to check and see if the dot works. They don't know if there's dust on it. They don't know if the lens is broken. They don't know if the battery's died. They don't know anything about the gun. Those types of folks are the same ones when they hit the rear sight on their Glock, for example, and knocked it over. They didn't realize the fact was there. I mean, I've had a cop who comes to a range. He didn't even know the rear sight on his gun was gone. And when you got non-gun guys carrying guns, the red dot sight does nothing for you and does nothing for them. So I'm not convinced that it's still an overall good tool for the general populace. It's great for gun guys, great for guys to practice with, but I'm still not convinced of that. And that I know I'm a minority opinion of that, but I still contend give it a couple more years and watch scores are going to go back to suck the same way they did before. Or you're already talking about it
Yeah.
because people are not practicing with it as much. So, and we
I,
can't see all, by the way, Eric.
I
You're right.
know. Hold on. Let me see if moving it. Oh, look, now moving it back here will work. Okay.
That's where he
Yeah.
started, and the
That's
sun
where I
was coming up.
started and I shifted it. Yeah. So, Mark, I agree, right? Like, Paul and Ken took a bunch of grief a few years back. But if you're talking about the folks who buy a gun as a talisman and it goes in the sock drawer, that's not the person who needs a red dot, right? Where I think it will help is folks who are at the bottom end of the acceptable skill set in a profession, right? Like that may bump them just enough up. The technology in and of itself isn't going to make them competent, right? But it's going to bump them up just a hair, especially with people who we know that some folks can't do certain things we're asking under stress, under duress. And that might be just the little thing that knocks them 1 percentage point up.
If we can we see and document that though? I mean, I don't know. I've talked to several guys who have gone in shootings with red dots, and at least the three that I talked to personally, they don't remember ever seeing the dot. All they did was put the gun in the window and pull the trigger. They cannot tell you they saw the dot.
Good, then they did it right.
Well, I'm not
If
arguing
they
that.
got the hits, they did it right. It's like, it's like with the irons. Daryl has said this. We didn't ask the right questions. Okay. They saw some form of a sight picture.
Right.
Was it soft focus? Was it close blur, far blur? Right. If they got the hits, then the majority of the shots fired hit what they wanted. Right. Then they saw enough of the sights to do it. It's a lot of it's how we ask questions. Right. And I don't doubt that from experience and from talking to folks, I know you can do front sight focus under duress, right? But not everybody can, and it takes years of work to do this. And we now know that, especially through the dots, that folks who are able to do soft focus work are able to process changes in the environment, like with a red dot sooner. Okay. The dot is a way to get there. It's not the only way.
I relate to the one that our friend Brian with the Y talked about in Oklahoma City, where you got three officers armed with carbines with red dot sights from the front door of a house into a room of the house 15 feet away, a side door of the house 15 feet away. All three officers exchanged 40 rounds with the bad guy with red dot sights on their rifles, and they wound the guy once. That's telling me that those red dots didn't work as far as that was the system, because they didn't use them.
Well, I'm going to argue that it wouldn't have mattered if they had iron sights, right? So there's other failures there. If the best that much lead in the air resulted in wounding, iron sights wouldn't have mattered. I'm not going to blame the sighting system on that. I'm going to blame the end user.
I'm not going to blame the sighting system either, but that's my point, though. It's not a good system. It's not the magic wand that everybody's making it out to be. It's still got to be aimed. You still got to shoot it. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. I like my red dots on my rifles. I like them more on my pistols, but would I carry a pistol with a red dot sight? Absolutely, I would not. I feel very confident with it, very comfortable with it. But as a personal choice, I won't carry them because I don't need it for what I do with it. You guys know what I carry, and I even carry an auto anymore. So for my line of work now, when I carry one for defensive use, my little revolvers work just fine. But yeah. I just think agency overall is not the answer that everybody thinks it is. And I think that maybe goes to Steve's question on that as far as why, what's going to be the secret to it. I don't think there is. I think it's still practice and maintain skill levels, and keep people training all the time. That's going to solve the problem. When we don't train people, we have bad results, and it's just that fact.
Well, I find it interesting that the conversation immediately went to dots, and that wasn't
necessarily. I didn't think it was dots that you were talking about.
Yeah,
probably not.
The Luddite.
Yeah.
The constable at the Luddite marshal's office.
While that is obviously the first thing that pops into mind, I will say that my state drastically watered down the standards for pistols as of July 1st, 2025. Excuse me, January 1st, 2025. They took out the 25-yard line totally, and then time standards dramatically increased, etc. We're still seeing the same challenges in getting cadets qualified, because you still have to learn how to press the trigger without moving the gun. So with that, I will say that for someone who has a basic understanding of how to press the trigger properly and grip the gun properly, something like a dot may allow them to shoot better at 25 yards versus or beyond than what they were previously doing. So maybe that will, but let's just go a different route. Suppose I'm an agency head and I want to all of a sudden buy all of my people staccato HD force because the single action trigger versus other triggers. Is that going to all of a sudden just a change in technology? increase what my officer's ability is? I don't think so. I think you're still going to have the same issues there. Go ahead, Eric.
It depends on what you do with it, and that's where you'll see the change. If you conduct legitimate transition training, right, you will see the benefit from the training of it. Now, going to a single action trigger, short, lighter, right, a little bit more forgiving of input errors. That's going to be some component to it. Where I believe you will see the benefit is from the transition training.
And that's, again, we saw that from revolvers to autos. Our scores went up dramatically because we did a lot of shooting to get used to the autos. And I think that's what people did with the red dots, is they did a lot of transition training to the red dot, and so they got higher scores. When the training end of it is the important part. It isn't the tool, it is the consistent training and performance you get. You know, if you can get guys to go out and shoot every 2 months, even if it's 15, 20 rounds, it's going to be much better than having them shoot 50 rounds or 100 rounds once a year. That consistent practice with them going out. And you don't even really have to shoot. I think we can do this. A lot of what we need to do to keep skills up without having to pull a trigger on the gun, by just having them dry practice with good solid dry practice in a ready room or wherever, is a safe area, without having to go out and pull or go and shoot on the range, but do it consistently and often where they have that skill set ingrained in them and they don't lose it. But we all know that firearm skills, especially handguns, are rapidly degenerating skills. If you don't practice, you lose a skill. And so practice is the thing we need to do with it. And trying to convince administrators of that is the hard part. They want to replace it with gear. Let's give this gun out doing this. Let's put the Staccato out with a red dot, a single action trigger, 4.5 pound trigger, and this will be the answer to our problems. And no, it won't be if you only do once a year. You're not going to do it. It's not going to change a thing.
Yeah, you can't buy it.
No.
Can't buy it at all. We're probably running a little long on this episode, but I want to get to this other question here. We have member of the audience wanted to know what metrics you think are likely for a successful outcome. In other words, to what training metric should a person be trying to meet that would likely indicate that they would be successful if forced to use it? And then what is your personal line between proficient, excellent, and master?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
All right, the first part of the question, what matrix? Being able to perform some very good standardized tests in a civilian world. One good one is for personal defense for civilian world, where shots are going to be very close range overall. If you can pass that course on a regular basis on demand without any warm up, then I think you've got a pretty good matrix of being able to defend yourself with it. I use the 5 rounds in 5 seconds on a 5-inch circle as another one that I keep for practice. A good standard also is for civilian world, is not a bad one, is 3 rounds in 3 seconds from your concealed carry system into a target at 3 yards and keeping it inside a B8 target. I think that's a more than probably acceptable for what a civilian does. For law enforcement, different world, different role, because we have to potentially shoot farther. Not civilians don't, but law enforcement has the potential of doing it farther. Some kind of course that will allow them to show proficiency of what they're seeing on the street. Like you, Lee, our state went to a new qualification course for the result of Phoenix PD, which is our largest one. And with it, they have some things in there that just are absolutely silly, like making failure drills at 15 yards as part of the qualification course to make up for the 25-yard shooting. But there's no penalty if you don't hit any of the headshots. You can miss all of the headshots that you make on it, and if you still got more or less than 6 misses on the target, you can pass the ball. And to me, that is a silly standard. One thing I think, whatever course we set up, we need to have it be 100% hits required. Misses are not allowed on the street, or shouldn't be allowed on the street. And if they are, there needs to be consequences for them. Yes, they're going to happen, but when a guy does a mag dump towards a bad guy, doesn't hit him, and there's no consequences for that if you've managed to survive the encounter, I think that's wrong because it's endangering the public. And there's an officer in Denver who was convicted for hitting a civilian or 6 civilians in a shootout where he had people behind him, shot the bad guy when he had other officers who had a clean shot. And as a result of that, he went to court on it and lost. So there should be consequences for actions on it. But 100% hits, that's the matrix that I provide myself. I do not accept misses. If I miss, I consider that a failure. Period. End of story. So, all right, Eric.
Oh boy, here we go. We were discussing this a bit before you came on. I agree with 100% hits on the scoring part of the target, right? They may not get 100% hits in the highest value part of the target. All right. I think that needs to be the standard profession wide. So there's that. Terms of an actual matrix or in terms of an actual measurement. John Hearn and I have both referenced Adam Biggs. He's a Navy doc, works on the Naval Special Warfare side, doing brain stuff. He's done a number of studies on decision making. I've done presentations with his material in it. John got him on the phone, talked to him at length. John was asking for specifics. Biggs wouldn't give those specifics. So John put it in terms of USPSA shooting ability. Okay. Now this is for guys in the military, which does have a carryover to law enforcement, right? It's not necessarily the same for decent, normal human beings. What Biggs said was high C, low B class shooter for having all the technical skill you will need to solve the problem. When you look at how USPSA and IDPA is structured, it's percentages of the best shooter, right? So we're never going to get everyone to a GM level. Okay. Quite frankly, getting everyone to an A class level would be very difficult just because of the percentages, right? You could take today's A class and try to make everybody get to it, and that'd be great, right? But it's probably not going to happen. C class shooter, right? Sharpshooter and IDPA, probably completely reasonable to get folks to. What would I look at for metrics? 5x5 drill, right? The only thing it doesn't test is reloads. It's shot at 10 yards. It's shot on an 8-inch, the down zero circle.
I'm talking about the Wilson 5x5.
Well, yeah, which IDPA has made the alternate classifier, right?
Yeah.
I would shoot it at the original Wilson times, at least for end users. I might throw in there for if you're doing dot stuff, I would throw in my 2x3 drill, draw strong hand only, speed reload, freestyle two shots. I'm sorry, draw strong hand only, 2 shots, speed reload, freestyle 2 shots, speed reload, transition to support hand, finish off. Right there, you've got reloads and you've got moving the gun, strong hand, both hands, weak hand. I would rather see more work done on practical application. Take a look at your body camera footage. Take a look at the area's body camera footage. What are you seeing playing out at events? And create training either in the virtual world with simulators or on the range that you can replicate that, right? A lot more judgment work, a lot more work picking up non-shoots in depth, right? Either in front of the targets or beyond. I'm seeing, trying to shoot from the back of the bus coming up frequently on body worn camera footage. That's for LE. And it happens in the military too. Generally not an issue for decent, normal human beings because of how their events play out, right? But they do need to be aware of what's on the backside of that target because we know it's a concern. And if you're just coming from the square range world where you got a 2-dimensional target in front of a 30-yard tall backstop, right? You're not necessarily working those problems. So anyway, just to go back, I would say the Wilson 5x5 would be a good standard. If you're running a dot, throw my 2x3 in on top of it because it forces the acquisition. And then enough scenario or judgmental shooting work that we have some idea of how your decision making is.
All right. The person asking the question was talking about, he's hearing it coming from competition shooters. Like, you got to have a 2-second bill drill. You got to have all this, that, and the other. I don't buy into that at all. I'm going to backtrack here for a second, go back to my state qual standards. There's a mandated course that cadets have to pass in the basic academy. Many agencies just shoot that course, but that's not the official. You got to do that from the state. Excuse me. Um, I would be okay with a 15-yard max distance squall course if it went to 100% hits. You know, you put one out in the green, it's a DQ. You don't credit for that, even if you get the magic 240 points, which is pathetic. Folks, on our qual course, you can miss the target completely 6 times and still qualify. So if you got all 10-point hits at the 3 and the 7, you don't even have to hit from the 25 to qualify. And that is absolutely pathetic. So I don't buy into that. I don't believe, going back to the way that the listener or viewer phrased the question, like the 2-second bill drill. I don't think the bill drill has relevance for defensive or application shooting whatsoever, because the bad guy's not going to stand perfectly still and let you shoot at him 6 straight times. Um, I understand what the drill is intended to do, and for that reason, I'm not saying it's a horrible drill. I just don't think it translates over. But if you want to start looking at that, I think you look at Gabe White's standards. If you could shoot his dark pin level standards with no drop points on demand, I think you're pretty good. And that's got a bill drill encompassed in. I think that's like a 3-second standard or something along those lines. I think you'd be fine. If you want to have a bill drill and something. If I were designing a test that I want everybody to be able to pass this test on demand, you would shoot the 5-yard roundup, you would shoot Bakersfield, and you would shoot handgun, Dave Spalding's handgun combative standards, and be able to pass them in the first go. And I think if you
So
could do all of those, you are pretty squared away with a handgun.
interestingly, I had switched to running the quals in my optics instructor class with the 5x5, sorry, 5-yard roundup, 5x5, and then the judgmental pres. And the
Mm-hmm.
feedback I got after this last one was you could pull the 5x5 out, just run the 5-yard roundup and the judgmental pres, and that would give us more time to work on other things. I'm trying to remember what Spalding's qual is, and it's not popping into my head right now. I won't argue against it. I won't argue
Mm-hmm.
against the 5x5. I was just giving you the feedback that I got from students in the last go
Yeah.
around.
Um, Spalding's qualification, well, he's calling the standards, was a like a multiple stage event. You had to like draw and hit a target under a certain time frame. You had to do a reload, one reload, one in a certain time frame. You had to be able to clear a malfunction and fire within a certain time frame, and clear a double feed and fire within a certain time frame.
Unless
So,
you're Hearn on video.
uh, no, that was in that class that we have Hearn's video, but yeah. I will say John did get a belt buckle for passing
Yes.
Spalding's standards in the first attempt. I also got a belt buckle for passing Spalding's standards in the first attempt, but I also got one for passing the 2x2. So Hearn one buckle, Lee two. That has to always be mentioned, even though the audience is probably tired of hearing about it. I, however, am not, and I think it's a pretty good standard to train to. Um, and there's videos out there on YouTube if you want to find them. I may post a score sheet in the show group later. The one
One
thing that's negative about it is that the malfunction's coming. You know that the other things are coming, and but it's hard to set those up to train to when you don't know they're going to happen.
one thing I would throw out for the discussion is the scoring.
Mm-hmm.
If it's typical cop scoring, it's no one left behind.
Mm-hmm.
So you have overly generous scoring areas
Yeah,
with overly generous par times. There's nothing wrong with
yeah,
par times,
yeah,
because look at Dial's 5-yard roundup, right? If you shoot it on the instructor
yeah.
par time, it's pretty spicy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, IDPA uses time plus, right?
Right.
Okay, that's worth. There's times that's worth looking at. The hit factor scoring, I understand the guy's pushing it a lot on the performance side. The question I ask is, how much time do you have to run that individually on the range? Maybe that's better in training.
Yeah.
Hey, this is a training quarter. Okay, because
Mm-hmm.
we would qual every weapon the gals carried the first quarter of the year, then the rest of the year was set up for training. Maybe that's where you run it, right? Or you
Yeah.
use it to develop your par times for your
Mm-hmm.
quals. I'm good with that, right? But that's one of those discussions, like what's a reasonable scoring area? What's a reasonable pass time for the passing standards.
I would have no problem that if you wanted to substitute for the 5-yard roundup to use Tom Givens' baseline assessment drill.
Mhm.
I think that would be basically along the same lines because it does force some strong hand and support hand on the shooting. And then, like I said, I love Bakersfield. And I said, I think you need a combination of those three.
Yeah.
And if you could go out, I said, Bakersfield, 5-yard roundup, or baseline assessment drill, and Spalding standards, I think you can do anything you need to do with a handgun.
Cold. You need to test all these stuff cold to start with to see where you are.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing you do. I'll just mention this. My agency was about a 70-man agency. I was given permission to do our training and basically any way I wanted. So I was given kind of carte blanche. I designed our own qualification course, which included in it manipulation drills prior to our qualification, where you had to do tack reloads under time, empty gun reloads, type 1, type 2, type 3 malfunctions, whatever you want to call them, however you want to do them. And we practiced those. And while you didn't get any points for them because we did them dry, you lost points if you didn't do them under the time limits. Now, I realize that tack reloads should not have a time limit in the street because tactics should never be graded on a time scale. But the point was to put stress on. Then we shot the qualification course to which was tighter than anything that Arizona Post came up with. I mean, we're trying to get our guys to do 2 hits out of the holster in 1.2 seconds. And my agency had a 94% expert rating, which was a 232 or higher, with 100% hits required in the silhouette, but the scoring area had to be there. And we had a 94% expert rating when I was 4 to 5 times a year. We went to a year, and our scores went down well into the 80s. And my department allowed me then to go back to doing 4 shoots a year, which was every 3 months. And it worked out well because the shootings we had on the street, which were not many because we're a very good department, but I think one of the reasons we didn't have shootings, because all the agencies around us did, is because our guys were trained at a high level that they waited and couldn't afford to wait until that last second to make them. But the shootings we had a 7% hit rate when I retired. We had 2 shootings retired, which dropped that down, not for a matter of effort, just for a matter of the hit didn't hit, to in the high 90s. We had a sergeant who fired 3 rounds at a guy who ran over him ran over his motorcycle while he was on it, and he returned fire at the guy. And the only reason why the guy didn't get hit was because the bullets didn't make it through the glass on the back of the camper shell, front glass of the camper shell, the rear glass of the pickup, and the headrest, which all 3 rounds were found in the headrest as the guy was driving away. But the rounds just didn't make it through. But the officer was shooting. He was our best shooter by far in our department, and he put all 3 rounds into the headrest of a moving vehicle that was driving away from him. So I don't count that as a failure, but we had that because we practiced a lot, and we did our qualification twice a year, and the rest of the time we did training with decision making and practice drills and stuff that I felt was relevant for what we needed to do on the street. So the question comes down, bottom line is practice. Go out and practice skills that will be usable on the street. Build drills great for competition. I just don't see us dumping those rounds into a single silhouette as being a good.
Right.
I see it viable for training.
Okay.
Maybe not every session, right? When you look at what it's intended to do, especially the retreating build drill, I see benefit to it for training practice. I don't know that I would plug into my qualification that on hit factor scoring.
Again, I think the magazine dump thing, I think maybe we have gone too far in the other direction. I know we didn't want to do 2 rounds and call it good as we did at Gunsight for years and years and years. But there's something to be said about guaranteeing those 2 hits and then seeing if you need to shoot again and making that decision. If you need to shoot again, magazine dump towards a guy and not hitting him once out of X number of rounds, or hitting him once out of X number of rounds fired, and not caring where the others go and not having any consequences when you don't do it.
I will say, when you look at the guys that are pushing it, they're not launching one round and five off the target misses. A lot of them are keeping them in the A zone or ACs, right? And there's not judgment involved. There's not worry about the target going away in the middle of it. There's not those concerns. I don't have a problem with it in training for practice. I would not plug it into my qual.
And I don't say I don't say I don't use it, because I do. I do use build drill. That's part of our overall program training. And it's good trigger reset and good control, being able to show you can control the gun. But like you said, if it's something that you do, and I'll give Arizona Post as a good example, we now have a 9-round mag dump drill in our qualification. You shoot 6, reload, and shoot 3 more in X number. Like, why are we training 9 rounds? What is the purpose for this other than people just shooting into the target? If it's This is part of our qual, and I don't understand the concept of it. They tried to explain it to me, and I don't buy it. So I'm more of a
Yeah.
two-shot, see what happens kind of guy.
Well, the question started out with being asked, what metrics? And I think when you're talking about metrics, it's like we're going to go shoot this measurable performance. I don't think any metric is going to be enough because they don't incorporate decision making, and I think all three of us will be in agreement on that. Um, the other part of the guy's question was, where do you draw the line between proficient, good, and expert? I forget what his language was. Proficient, excellent, and master. Um, to me, they're all the same thing. If you could regularly shoot the three metrics that I listed together, no points dropped, on the standard, I think you're there. Um, and I'm not necessarily going to draw a line between proficient, excellent, and master, uh, so to speak. Because quite frankly, to me, all classifications are so you're second sharpshooter instead of 27th overall, or second C class instead of 37th, whatever. Um, I think either you're proficient or you're not, and I don't think there needs to be qualifiers to that. Um, so you need to be able to do any of these standards on demand uh, to reach that title. Any thoughts on those before we go to the last thing? Because the last one's going to go back to what you two were just talking about. Mark?
Okay. I don't disagree with that. The standards need to be set. I mean, qualifications for law enforcement are set, where you have pass or fail, or you have rating systems of their. We used to do pin shoots once a year, where you have your marksmanship pin on your uniform, and I know guys who would shoot, mediocre scores, and then we go out and get them to practice up, and they'd go out and do a pin shoot and have to do them cold, and they'd come in and say, "Hey, I got expert. I want my extra pin." People will take pride in it if you give them that. And we found that with our agency, that you gave them something that was sustainable, that they would get pride into it. The expert thing, it's hard to incorporate that within a street level, because the dynamics of street gunfighting is so different than the qualifications that we do on the street. We can try to emulate the distances and the times and the number of rounds, but there's so many variables there. I mean, my standard department qualification, you had to hit 2 hits, in X number of seconds, either from ready or from the holster. And we had a 2-second drill for everything we did on our wall that time. Yet I get involved in my shooting because as soon as I pulled the trigger, the guy fell out of my sights and I couldn't see him anymore instantly. I mean, so the decision making has to be there. I think that's the that maximum speed all the time. Look at making some decisions onto when you're going to shoot would be a good metrics as to the skill level you have, and rating that whether you're expert, etc. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I want to bring up Matt Little. I think that's his name, Graybeard Actual. Has a podcast called The Way Is in Training, and he has brought up on a couple of recent episodes that the standard in USPSA for the build drill is sub 2 second, And there have been a couple of championship matches where that's been inserted as a stage. And none of these guys that can do it on practice all day long shot a sub 2 second bill drill in the match when it counted because they couldn't, they had to be accountable for every shot. And all of them backed off a little bit. That to me was pretty telling info. Eric and I were talking before the show and before Mark came in on the Texas Tactical Peace Officer podcast. I've heard a couple of guys talking about, um, and I may be misquoting this. When we watch the body cams, guys are shooting as fast as they can pull the trigger. So basically a quarter of a second splits on their shots. So that's where we need to be training. Uh, and that may be an oversimplification of what some, not all of the people are expounding on that show. I love listening to it. It's great stuff comes along out of it. Eric, you had an interesting thought on that.
I would take people up to that, up to what we have, up to like 0.25, 0.2, potentially even below that. Let them see where their wheels come off. Put them on turning targets, not only to initiate, but to end the string of fire and see what they're shooting. New paragraph. Take into consideration the most recent force science study, Lewinsky stuff from the mid-teens, Alexander Jason stuff, which I heard back in 2010 about stopping speeds, right? And the most recent one from Force Science, the best shooters they had, the ones that could maintain control, if you will, were still firing 2 extra shots. Okay. Alexander Jason's work, I know, talked about the emotional tie, right? Like somebody's trying to kill me, I might keep shooting. I don't want to push people. I want to take them to where they can see the wheels fall off and bring them back where they can work at a speed, cadence, not cadence because that invokes a bad decision, but a speed at which they can process changes in the environment, right? Jared Rustin talked about that in a video he did with Surefire about his last shooting. I was telling Lee I was doing a round count shoot the other day to get rounds through a gun for an article, and I was just trying to hit numbers. And I'm like, well, let me make it worthwhile. So I was doing some of the various match games with splits on them, and I was pretty consistent at 0.38, 0.39 to 0.45 on my splits, and I was running 3-shot strings. So pick it up, go to unloaded gun, pick up the magazine, load it, run the slide, and fire 3 shots with the timer going. I was using it for stimulus, but I wanted to see what the splits were. And I was staying pretty consistent in that 0.4-ish range, which we know works with processing time. So I was actually kind of happy with myself for that. Not going to run out and be a GM tomorrow with those times, but my movement's not going to help me get there either.
Lack thereof.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with pushing people in training and trying to get them to see with their level that they're going to fall apart. I don't have a problem with that at all. I do think if they were training people to shoot at 0.25 as the norm, we're going to see shots fired after the situation changes, and we're going to launch shots into the ether. And I don't know how you train out of that.
There's an emotional attachment to it, right? Somebody's trying to kill me, and we tend to hit the gas pedal. I won't say it hasn't happened to me.
Yeah.
But we need to try to get folks into a place where they understand when I start going too quick, this is where the wheels fall off. This either decision making or outcome hits, right? And where's an area that I can work, and then let them work in that area comfortably, right? And we need to get away from static 2-dimensional targets with overly large scoring areas. Put them on stuff that's angled. Put them on stuff that turns away in the middle of the course of fire, goes away in the middle of the course of fire. So
I 3-dimensional target. I think those are important too because where you're hitting on the bad guy on 2-dimensional.
And Mark is frozen up.
Yep.
His connection was starting to get. You froze up, though, Mark.
Oh, sorry. I'm there. You go. Back. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now.
Okay. One thing is, I think 3-dimensional targets are also something that should be incorporated because 2-dimensional, you hit center mass no matter what angle you shoot at, and that's not real world. And we need to get guys to understand that. And that tactical anatomy class that oh gosh, Doc Stewart. Is it Doc Stewart? I think it is.
Yeah.
And Chuck Hager do. I
Williams.
think Doc Williams. That's it. Stuart Williams.
Yeah, Doc Williams isn't in it. It's Miller, Kerwin, Haggard, Moses. There's other guys that are teaching that summit that's going around.
I think it's a good call to look at, but we need to do that. We did three-dimensional targets as often as we could just to give that. I like the idea of the turning targets. Having strict time limits, I think, pushes guys faster. But in decision making, you really want to do that. If you're making them make decisions as a shoot, don't shoot, or threats or whatever scenarios that you were setting up, then time should not be played into it, and people should be allowed to make the decisions based on what they're seeing and processing versus a arbitrary time limit.
I've talked about it on the show before. I can shoot at around 0.4 and be making conscious decisions. I can shoot the gun much faster than that, but they're all pre-made decisions.
Yeah.
And this is not out in the field is not a pre-made decision world. And so I guess with that, if you start to getting too tied into metrics, you're also not acknowledging that it's not a pre-decision world. And you have to be able to adjust to what's happening around you. I try to tell students, you're shooting one shot at a time. Every shot's an individual decision. You need to stay in that mindful. And I'm saying that in the coolness of my own kitchen, not with somebody trying to kill me.
Yeah. I'll throw in also pre-programming, constantly repeating a drill over and over again. If that is the last thing you did, you're probably going to go to that when you're thrown into something. I'll give you a good example. At gun site, we were doing 2 rounds on each, El Presidentes, etc. 2 rounds on each target every single time. Every single time we addressed targets, we got 2 hits on each. I then return back home and I go to a local IPSC match, and the drill was 1 hit on each of 4 targets. 3 times, not just once, 3 times. I started out shooting 2 rounds on each target because that is what I had programmed in my brain from going through a week at gun sight and coming back a week later and shooting a match. So the practice you do on the range can have a great effect of what you're going to do on the street or under a stress or condition. And I was just shooting a match. That's all I was doing. And I said it to myself, but when I started pulling the trigger, I was putting 2 rounds in that target. And, it's taught me a valuable lesson on that, is to be careful what we're actually teaching folks to do with every shot. So something else to give them all.
All right. We have gone probably longer than the normal episode. So we need to go ahead and get to our wrap up. Mark, what do you have coming up and any final thoughts?
As far as classes, again, I do most of my stuff is government contract stuff. I do have some classes. I am doing Thunderstick along with several other folks out in Pahrump, Nevada in October. And then we have Revolver Roundup at Gunsight, which is always a good class. Those are my 2 civilian available classes available. Otherwise, I got instructor schools that I'm teaching from now to the end of the year. And then my normal open enrollment class, if you will, is up in Tower, Wyoming every June. And that is through my email at Mark, M-A-R, I'm trying to back up, AFTT17, that's Adam Frank Tom 17 at msn.com. That's my email. Because again, most of my stuff is government contract work, and I'm busier than I want to be. I have not even kept up a web page. In fact, I just let it expire and it's gone, so I don't have a web contact anymore. But those are the ways to contact me through that. So AFTT17 at msn.com. So that's me.
Eric?
So CougarMountainSolutions.com is the website. Cougar Mountain Solutions will get you to me anywhere on social media. Racine, Wisconsin, the 16th and 17th for red dot and shotgun. One day a red dot, one day a shotgun. Thunderstick at the end of September. Then I get busy. Shotgun in Texas. Red dot down at Talladega at the CMP facility down there. Coming back to Utah for 2 days of red dot. Back to Dallas, started November for red dot.
You left out one. You left out
Oh,
one.
sorry, I forgot Cognitive Conclave. Thank you. I was trying to remember what I had at the end of October. Cognitive Conclave at Red Hill in Georgia, then Dallas, a couple other places in November for classes, then Mead Hall in December for reactive shotgun, proactive shotgun, and red dot. The proactive shotgun class at Mead Hall will have a low light block. And also in November, LE only pistol mounted optic instructor class down in Lake Mead, national, whatever it is down there. Federal agencies hosting it, but it's open to all LE.
Eric, don't forget, you're also going to be at the roundup.
Yeah, something like that.
All right, I have the Cognitive Conclave coming up at the end of October with Eric, John Hearn, and John Holston. As of last night, there are 18 tickets have been sold, so 12 more tickets available. We have a hard cap of 13 on, excuse me, of 30 on that class, and we've still got a couple of months to go. So I'm expecting it to go ahead and fill on up pretty quick. If we're at 18 now, I'm pretty optimistic. Then I have the Range Master Instructor Reunion the first weekend in December in Nashville. Uh, I just haven't been scheduling classes due to all the surgeries I've had, the job change, and crazy schedules and everything that have gone along with that. I need to get back to offering classes, but right now, I just sometimes when I student all day, every day, I just on the weekends, um, I just don't want to do that. And I've gotten back into shooting matches lately and enjoying that. And that's given me some time just to go have fun and shoot. I did go to the Bluefield, Virginia Glock match this past weekend and finished ninth out of 60 something shooters in the MOS division. I started that off with the best ever 5 to Glock stage I have ever shot. And then I promptly drove right off the cliff after that. And still finished ninth, but I'm not happy because I should have set a personal record and been higher in that match. But hey, that's the way it goes. With that, I'd like to thank my guest tonight because we know how hard it is to get time to do something like this. And to the audience, thank you for choosing to spend your time with us.